All right, lovely people. For those of you who have stayed on with us from the morning, we're now in the second track of Full Circle 2024. And for those of you who've joined us just now, welcome. And we're very, very excited to have you. We're now kickstarting the second leg of Full Circle 2024, creating content that drives action. And this one's right up my street, so I'm particularly excited about it. Also, because for the first session in this track, we're joined by the peerless Jess Cook, who's going to be talking about testing content ideas with, wait for it, it's a tongue twister, minimum viable content. I was dead scared that I'd get this wrong. If you want to know what I'm talking about, just try saying minimum viable content out loud really fast. Jess, on that note, thank you so much for being here today with us and for joining us at Full Circle. To introduce all of you to Jess, apart from hosting sessions with hard to pronounce titles, Jess is also the head of content and comms at Island. She brings over 20 years of experience working with major brands like McDonald's, Blue Cross, and Fastly. And she's going to share her super practical approach for small teams, where instead of gambling your time and your resources on big content pieces, you learn how to validate ideas really quickly and pivot on them based on actual real-time feedback from your audiences and your prospects. To make this super interactive and to be able to talk to as many of you as she possibly can, Jess actually pre-recorded her session so that we can be more present in the chat and she can elaborate on your questions as she explains her approach. But to get us started initially, Jess has a few questions for all of you. Jess, why don't you take that on?
Awesome. Thank you, Pallavi. That was such an intro. Thank you for being my hype woman. Amazing. And George, thank you so much for having me as part of this lineup. Amazing event. So excited to be here. I know for a fact that when we were recording this, there are at least 4 bloopers of me twisting my tongue trying to say minimum viable content. So it is tough. No worries at all. Question for everyone here. Throw your favorite emoji in the chat if you have ever worked your ass off on a piece of content, put it out into the world, and heard crickets. I know we've all experienced this, so let me see it. Let's do it. Let's see those emojis. Yeah, for sure. Okay, hold on. I'm going to find my favorite emoji. It's the little chef's kiss hand. I got to find it. I got to scroll. Oh man, I don't think Air Meat has it. Okay, we'll do this one. There we go. All right. Put your favorite number in the chat if you consistently test your content. In any way, shape, or form, if you consistently test your content somehow. I'm going to drop my favorite number 13 for Taylor Swift. You didn't know you were going to get this kind of show this morning, did you, George?
No.
George, you're clearly outnumbered by the women on this session. I think we like to keep it that way.
All right, Amy, I love to see it. Amazing. Andres and Sumi and Brooke, yeah, you've all put pieces of content out and you're like, man, crickets. Okay, one more thing. How many of you have a channel that you feel pretty comfortable that you could test some ideas in? Put your favorite, put your favorite, all right, we're going for it, George. Put your favorite swear word. Just do it. Just put your favorite swear word in the chat.
I'm a school teacher.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I didn't know we were keeping a PG.
I'm doing the same thing as you, George. There we go. Yes. Excellent, Amy. Okay. I'm so glad to hear we have all kind of the same challenges, but we also have some opportunities. Some of us have a place where we feel pretty comfortable we could test. Maybe we're not really sure how to do it. today in this recording, I'm going to walk you through exactly my process for testing ideas and then slowly kind of scaling them up until I get to a point where I feel like we can do this on a much bigger scale and really get some business impact out of it. So with that, I think we can get started. I will be in the chat. Drop your questions, your comments, whatever, favorite swear words if you didn't get a chance to do it yet in the chat, and I will be there. And
Hey everyone,
I'll be back.
thank you so much for joining today.
I think we just got a little ahead of ourselves.
All good. Go for it.
Okay.
I'm wearing the same sweater, by the way, for continuity.
Consistency.
Yeah.
All right, let's do this.
Today, I'm Jess Cook, and I am here to tell you my exact process for testing your way to better results with minimum viable content. This is something that I use and have used for a while now to gauge audience interest in certain topics and ideas and understand which of those topics and which of those ideas are worth my time, my team's time, and the marketing department's time in general if we want to turn it into some kind of big campaign or larger theme for the quarter. So to get started, first want to talk through what we're going to learn today. So we're going to talk about what is an MVC, what is minimum viable content, and why it's an important part of your content strategy. It is part of your strategy. It's not just a tactic, and can be built and regarded as such as you create your content and you understand which stories you want to be telling for your brand. We're also going to talk about how minimum viable content helps you test ideas, save time, and pivot quickly based on real world feedback. We're going to talk about exactly the kind of real world feedback you're going to be looking for. It's a little different than probably most of the measurements that you're looking at in terms of content performance, and we'll talk about that. And then we're also going to talk about what are the must-haves for creating high value, minimum viable. I'm going to start that over. We're also going to talk about what are the must-haves for creating high valuable. Oh my gosh. We're also going to talk about what are the must-haves and the nice-to-have things to go into your minimum viable content. There are certain things you can wait on. You do not need for that V1, and you can iterate and bring it to V2 and V3 and moving forward in your program. We're going to talk about exactly what those kinds of things are. All right. What is minimum viable content? It is very difficult to say, by the way. Don't try to say it fast. You will trip yourself up. I've tried. I've been practicing and I'm still failing saying it. Minimum viable content. Minimum viable content is content that contains just enough value to validate the strength of an idea. So it is boiling an idea down to the lowest common denominator that would allow you to give your audience a taste of the idea and see how they react. See if they like it, see if they engage, see what they think about it, if they comment, if they share, or if they do nothing. And it's going to tell you a lot. You're going to be able to learn a ton from this approach. It's often in a very simple format. I like to start with the simplest format, usually an image and a bit of copy to go with it if the channel that you're delivering it in kind of dictates that. And something that leaves plenty of room to expand and repurpose. So if you were to try it again, you might step it up a level, but you're starting from a very, very basic point, one that allows you just to see if the idea resonates at all, just enough value to validate the strength of the idea. I will also say the format depends on your strengths and your team's strengths. If you have a really great designer who, can whip a motion graphic up really quickly, amazing. But if you want to start even smaller than that, if this is something you yourself have the ability and kind of the permission to whip up in Canva, even better. Create a small image, create kind of the base version of this idea in the simplest format possible. All right, why is minimum viable content important? So first of all, it's going to help you move fast because you're boiling an idea down to its simplest version, because you're turning it into a format that is really easy to deliver. You're going to be able to ship it very quickly and start getting feedback on it very quickly and understand if it's resonating or not very fast. It's going to allow you to learn and move on and decide which ideas are worth your time. It's going to let you double down on the MVCs that succeed. So let's say you put a small, kind of MVC out into the world in social, in your email newsletter, and you get really great feedback on it. You are going to want to continue to maybe iterate on that and maybe like small kind of steps up. And we'll talk about this in a little bit to make sure that it is indeed a resonant idea. So you can really put some time into it and you can find the ones that are doing that, right? Like you'll be able to put that out. You'll be able to see people engaging, sharing, commenting, going to the landing page, wherever it drives to, if it drives somewhere, and you'll be able to find very quickly which ones that succeed. So those are the ideas you want to spend more time on. And maybe even most importantly, number 3, they're going to allow you to move on from the minimum viable content that does not perform. This is how we understand where to not spend our time. We're not going to spend our time on content that only people in the company are reacting to. We're not going to spend time on content where our buyers aren't paying attention, don't find it particularly interesting. So you'll be able to very quickly understand, this is not an idea that we should be pursuing. Doesn't matter where it came from. If the CEO says, hey, I really want to talk about this, and you test it in this way with an MVC a handful of times and get nothing back, now you have data to go and shout and say, the team probably should not be spending very much time on this. Okay, so we know what it is. We know why it's important. Now we want to look at some examples. So I am head of content and comms at a company called Island. This is a piece of content, minimum viable content that we put out a little while back and have reposted since. We started with this idea because we heard from our customers and from our sales team that this particular type of legacy technology called VDI is a really, really horrible experience for users. Essentially, just to give you the backstory on this, VDI is a way to bring security to a computer by taking your desktop and actually streaming it far, far away and streaming a video of the desktop back to your machine. So the experience is horrible, as you can imagine, because your mouse is a little bit behind where you're actually moving because the information is having to go, halfway around the world and then back. It's streaming. There's a lag. You're trying to click on something and maybe the mouse isn't quite lined up. Really difficult. People just really do not like this experience. And we understood this about our customers. We understood this from our sales team that VDI is the bane of our buyers' existence, of our IT audience existence. So we came up with this idea of what if we started writing breakup letters to VDI and just kind of see how people react to it. So we started with this simple image with a bit of copy and we put it out in our social space. We do have a pretty decent following, so I knew we'd get some good signal. It was a space where we had enough people to give us a good signal of whether or not this was an interesting idea. And you can see from the engagement there, people really like it. This is above average engagement for us, 178, it looks like, 176 reactions, 5 comments, and 28 reposts. That's pretty good. One other thing I want to show you or want you to notice that I definitely noticed was people are using the laugh reaction on this post. Now, Island is a pretty kind of sage-like, wise brand voice. And we are delivering kind of advice to IT professionals, usually at the C level, the exec level. And so we don't often use a lot of humor. We don't do memes. We don't do anything kind of, any kind of parodies or anything like that. This is about as close as we get to anything humorous. And we're leaning into the humor of that frustration. And so this was the first time I'd ever seen our audience use the laugh reaction on our content. And that was a big signal for me. We'll talk about that in a bit. Here's another example. This one's a little harder to read, but I'll walk you through exactly what this is. So this was from a company I was at a couple years back called Marpipe. Marpipe was creative testing software for ad creative. And they had these really interesting data points that showed that if you made even small changes to the design, to the image, to the call to action, you could see pretty big changes in ad performance. And so this one pager outlines the performance difference between these two ads that only have one small difference. So if you look at that very first set, you can see kind of the line on the right side of the text box is straight on the left and kind of like scalloped on the right. The image is a little different in that second set. The call to action is different in the third set. The design of the illustration of kind of like the meter in that fourth set is a little different. And then the position of the product in the photography in that fifth set is a little different. So what we're showing here is just kind of like, hey, when you test small changes in your ads, you can see a big difference in performance. This was just a one pager I gave to the sales team. And I got great feedback on this piece that, hey, can we create some more of these whenever, let's say we get another 5 sets of ads that we have customer approval to use. Let's do another one. Hey, can we use this other places? Like, let's turn this into, other stuff that we can share digitally, that we can kind of bring people into the site. Maybe we can use it in social. And so we'll get to this a little bit more. I blew this one up and we went all out, and we're going to talk about that. So 2 great pieces of minimum viable content. We're going to talk about exactly why they're great. So must-haves for a piece of minimum viable content. It's nothing prescriptive like a great headline or really nice imagery. No, it's much more fundamental. These are really kind of the three pieces, maybe 3.5. So the first one is a mind and heart changing point of view. It's an imperative. It is what your company's unique belief is based on its value prop. I could give you a whole talk about point of view and how to find that. But really, it's got to be something that the company believes and is based in what your product, what your brand delivers. And it has to be kind of obvious. It has to be not overtly stated, but in seeing the piece of content, it has to be felt and known. It's an abridged version of the idea. Again, we talked about this. It's the lowest common denominator. I probably could have gotten away with maybe even 3 ad sets on that one pager to make it a true minimum viable content. But really, it's just kind of what do I have to have here in order to convey this idea and get some signal and see if it resonates. And the third, and maybe kind of the 3.5, is this simple to execute format. We talked about this already. An image, a headline, a one pager, a social post, and distributed in a channel that will deliver enough signal. So again, if you have a decent enough following, that's a great place to test. That's actually my favorite place to test. A newsletter is also fantastic if you have a great email list and you have an engaged audience who's willing to provide feedback. That is another really, really great place to test it out. So now we're going to look at those 2 pieces, those 2 examples that we just looked at, and see where those three things kind of line up. So mind and heart changing point of view. The not overt, we didn't say in this text, you must get rid of VDI, right? But the message, the copy, the idea, the breakup letter, the idea is we're saying there's a better way and you do not have to deal with VDI anymore. So it really is kind of getting people to think, oh, hey, maybe, this is a product that we've used that like the experience is horrible, but there was never another way to do it. And it's kind of looking through this piece of content, like there might be another way to do it. And I'm going to look into this. It's an abridged version of the idea. Again, very simple text on a green background with a short post. That was enough to get the message across and see if there were legs, see if people reacted in the way we were hoping they would react. and a simple to execute format. This is something my designers came up with, but this is something that, they could have very easily created a template for me in Canva, which I've done before with them. It was very easy to kind of recreate ideas that way. I could have gone in with 10 different, breakup letters to VDI, things we could say, and we could have, crafted a series of these and decided how we wanted to distribute those and see if, maybe these three breakup letters to VDI are the top performers, right? For the one pager, same thing. The mind and heart changing point of view is you can find out what these little changes are that affect performance in such a big way, right? The headline actually really says it without, being super overt about it. One small change can blow up conversion rates. But you won't know that if you don't test. And that's really the heart of it, right? We're a testing platform. You would never know if these little tiny changes were to make a big difference unless you test. So that's kind of the point of view for this piece. It's an abridged version. It's just a one pager. There's not a whole lot of analysis or kind of breakdown of the testing process here. It is really simply showing you simple difference, major difference in performance. And it was a very simple to execute format. I worked with the designer to create this, but it, maybe took a couple days once I had the approval to use these ad sets. And I distributed this through our sales team. We didn't have a very large social following yet. And so wanted to, get this out in a way where I knew I could get some good real world feedback. So starting with a one pager made sense for us, giving it to sales so that I could, we had a handful of salespeople and I could give this to them. And at the end of the week say, okay, well, what were people saying about this? What were some of the sound bites? How did it help you as a salesperson kind of describe the process of testing and why it's important? So was able to get a lot of great feedback that way. Okay. Nice to haves. Things that you do not need on V1. Very important. This is any major dependency that may hold you back. These are things like really polished visuals. Turning an idea into a video, probably not necessary to test the very first time. Customer quotes or social proof. Customer quotes, customer stories, customer validation, and customer approval are some of the hardest things to come by in content. So waiting around for those means you are not learning. You are not shipping the piece. You're not learning as fast as you could. You can absolutely move forward without that customer quote, without that customer validation or proof, and still learn a ton. And while it's out there, while you're getting that feedback, you can go off and get that, customer validation that you need for version 2. And then deep data and analysis is another one. There is no need to write a full-fledged deep dive on anything that you're trying to just test an idea on. On that one pager you saw, there were some kind of statistics or there were some performance indicators or, increases or decreases in certain KPIs to show that the performance had shifted so dramatically through testing. That was really all I needed. I didn't need to understand, why or how many units were in the test and what else did they test? What other variables did they run through? There was just really no need to understand if this idea, this kind of thought of one simple change can create a huge difference in performance is actually an idea that resonates. So these are things, again, this is not a full list. There are many other things out there like this, but really anything that's going to hold you back from quickly shipping and learning, think very thoroughly about, is this something I need for V1? Is it something that is critical to the idea itself, or is it a nice to have, and can I move on? Oh, hey, save these for future iterations. That was my main point. No need to wait. You can hold on to these. These are all great things. These are the makings of really, really great cornerstone content. But again, we're not working on cornerstone content. We're working on minimum viable content. If you are ever in doubt, come back to that idea, minimum viable content. What are the must-haves for this idea to shine through? Okay, so you've made your minimum viable content. You've put it out into the world. It's in your social feed. It's out in your newsletter. Your sales team has it in hand. It's being used in the wild. What does success look like? It's really difficult to track anything to do with content back to pipeline or performance, right? It's one in hundreds of touches along the path from awareness to purchase. And it's actually even more difficult sometimes with a minimum viable content because it's such a small piece. Typically, you're just trying to test it out, and so a lot of this is going to be anecdotal, and that is okay. So let's just start there. Anecdotal evidence is totally fine in this case because you're really just trying to build a case for another test and the next bigger test, and then maybe the full-fledged, content campaign. So the first one is positive feedback from sales. This was the case with that one pager, right? I handed it to sales. I heard back from them. Yes, this is really helpful. People get it when they see this. And it's really helped me tell the story of the product. So that's a great thing to look for. You can also get this if you've put something into social media as well. I often will get like a screenshot of a text sent to me on Slack. My customer, my sales rep is saying to me, my customer just sent me this. They really thought that piece of content was awesome, right? And the text will say something like, whoever came up with this is brilliant. And it's not me, by the way. We have a head of brand who typically comes up with all of these incredible social ideas at Island, named Ari Yablak. So things like that are really great. Another piece of feedback from sales you can get is if the sales team is reposting that piece of content in social. If they feel that it is worthy of being in their own personal feed, that's a great sign as well. Number 2 is above average engagement. So look back at the rest of your content in social, in your newsletter that you have given to your sales team. What kind of feedback? What was the volume of feedback you got on that? What was the engagement rate that you saw on that piece of content? Did this do better or worse? That's really like maybe a baseline for you to start from is, does this perform better than most of our stuff? And if so, that you maybe have struck a nerve. And if not, it might just warrant another test. Maybe there's just, one little thing that was missing. Maybe, here's another thing. Maybe today everyone in your audience was at a conference. This happens to IT audiences all the time. There's a million conferences. As I record this right now, there's a huge conference going on down in Florida. So we didn't really post anything important because we didn't want people to miss it in social this week, right? So try again. You can try again as quickly as, the next day or the following week. Try it again. If you have a hunch that it could work, this is a really low risk way to figure it out. And if you're wrong, again, you've only put the amount of time into it that it took to build minimum viable content. So it's no skin off your back. And third, and this one actually is the most exciting to me, is what I'm calling deferred engagement. So we talked about this when we were looking at the VDI post, right? That was the first time I'd ever seen our audience use the laugh emoji. That's a rarely used reaction for us. Are people using a reaction you don't typically see them use? That is a really good sign that maybe you've hit a nerve that you've never hit with your content before. Increase reposts and shares. People are, reposting this at a rate that you don't typically see. Or maybe they're tagging their friends or their colleagues in the comments because they want them to see this piece of content. That's another great sign. And then highly valuable personas are the people commenting and liking of in your buyer group more so than most of the content you post, right? Is most of the content you post seen by admins or users? And this piece of content, this minimum viable content, all of a sudden, the C level or VP level folks are really engaging with this. Ooh, okay, you've hit something here. There's something good with this idea. These are all things to look at. And notice I didn't say, anything like increase in followers, right? These are not really super measurable or something that is documented within the LinkedIn platform, or you're going to be able to find in HubSpot in your, metrics on your newsletter. These are things you're going to have to kind of watch for and observe, but it does not make the data any less valuable. So keep your eye open for these. Okay. We're going to get into some meaty stuff here now. We're going to take some of these examples and we're going to talk through real world, how I put them out into the wild, what the reception was, and what we did next in two different cases. One with the Island VDI example and one with the Marpipe performance difference in the ad set example, the one pager. And we're going to see kind of two different ways that this can go. So the thing I want you to learn here is to measure twice, cut once, meaning don't let one small MVC test be the thing that helps you decide whether or not you're going to move forward with a very large program. Oftentimes, you will get a great response the first time. You're going to want to try it again because sometimes lightning strikes twice and sometimes it doesn't. So let's take a look at the Island VDI example. So the one on the left is the one we looked at earlier. This was the simple image that we put out into the world. That was the VDI breakup letter. The one on the right is just a single step up from that. This is a GIF, another breakup letter. And I didn't insert this as a GIF for this presentation, but I can kind of walk you through the animation. But essentially what this did was it started typing. I can't do this anymore, but in the middle of the word anymore, the little kind of spinny wheel popped up, signaling that the VDI was lagging, that you were going to have to wait for it to catch up. And so it was kind of this inside joke to the people in IT that like, you can't even break up with VDI on VDI. It's that difficult. Again, we got some really great response and engagement to this. And same thing this time. We saw the laugh reaction. We saw above average engagement. We saw differed engagement from mostly our buyers' job titles and from enterprise companies, which was very exciting. We saw a lot of comments. We don't often get a ton of comments. Corporate pages don't often get a ton of discussion and comments on their content. So that was really great to see. So we just took it one step further, right? Turning an image into a GIF. We have very similar copy. This one even had a link in it, which I'm actually shocked realizing now we had a link in this post and it still did so well. So that's exciting. LinkedIn does not like links in posts, by the way. So now I have seen twice where this message about VDI, specifically in this kind of humor of frustration packaging, performs really well. So I mentioned Ari Yablock earlier. He's our head of brand. He had this brilliant idea to take this, I would even say like 3 steps further. Why don't we create a video of someone typing a long form breakup letter to VDI? We'll set it to really sappy, like piano music. And we'll kind of use this gag of the spinning wheel again to kind of bring that to life. So I didn't actually insert the video here. If you want to see it, it's still up on Island's feed on LinkedIn. It's so brilliant. It's so good. Again, you can see the engagement here is incredible. 256 reactions, 14 comments, 35 reposts. The really exciting thing to me is if you look on the right, the titles of the people commenting and their comments are really, really high quality. These are our buyers. We are getting them to laugh. We're getting to a place where they understand that we understand them. And so that is really, really exciting to me. So now we know we have kind of this niche that we can capitalize on of this, the humor frustration around VDI. what else can we do with this? And the possibilities, really, there's so many, right? We're never short on ideas as content marketers, but we want to make sure that they are the right ideas. And I felt very confident after having done this a few times now, like we really have something here. Like this video, we could put that on a YouTube ad. It would perform really, really well. Some version of it, right? And another exciting thing, this was a 2-minute long video, and the video completions on this were double what they typically were for us. And that is saying something with a 2-minute video on LinkedIn. So again, measure twice or 3 times and cut once. Make sure that the idea really does resonate a couple of times in a couple of different ways or a few different ways before you move forward. Because sometimes it doesn't go the way you think it's going to. And I want to walk you through an example where this happened as well. So let's go back to this Marpipe one-pager, right? The one-pager was a huge success. And I wanted to do more with it. I knew that we had just kind of, this was just the tip of the iceberg for the content that was here and the things that we could do with it. So I took that exact same content, these same 5 ad sets, all of the data that's here, and I turned it into a blog post, how to increase ad conversion rate with one small change. Same point of view, but blown up. This is no longer an MVC, right? I had enough information and feedback on the MVC to know this can be a bigger thing. So I turned it into a blog post, really just talk through the testing processes that each of these customers had gone through to get to these results, the number of ads they tested, the different types of variables that they tested, and showed the stark difference between the winner and the underperformer. Then I thought, you know what? It would be really fun to turn this into a quiz and see if people could actually guess the winner. We're marketers. We really think we know our stuff. We think because we've been doing this for however many years, we have better intuition than most around what performs and what doesn't, just by looking at it, right? And I wondered if people really could guess. And my hypothesis was that they could not, right? That was why Marpipe existed, to show people that you can't be biased about your ad creative. We have to test. The only way to really know if it works is if you test. So I created this quiz. And I wanted to distribute it like any good content marketer does. And so I dropped it onto Twitter, when it was still Twitter, by the way, not when it was X. And a really crazy thing happened. This quiz blew up, and within 48 hours, we had 2,000 people, marketers, take this quiz. Nothing I was prepared for. I had told my manager at the time that my goal was to get 100 completions, because then I would feel like, okay, I have 100 respondents. I can, this feels like valid enough data. And so definitely busted through that. So great, lightning strike here. This is amazing. So then I was like, I have all this data now. I'm going to turn this into a report. So I turned it into a report. I took all the findings. By the way, it turns out that if you want to figure out, darn it. Sorry. Let me get my bearings here. It turns out marketers can only guess winning ad creative 52% of the time. You might as well flip a coin. That was what this study found after 2,000 people taking it. So put all of that into the report. We talked about, hey, it doesn't even matter like what kind of marketer you are. Each ad set was failed most by a different type of marketer, right? So we went through that. We dissected this data as much as possible. So now we have this awesome report. And we were hearing from people on Twitter, and we put this report out on Twitter as well, right? We contacted all of the people who had tweeted about the quiz in the first place and said they took it and shared their results. And we let them know, hey, we took your results and we turned it into a report. So now we have this great report. We have people coming to us on Twitter saying, I would play this game, I would do this quiz every day if you had a new one for me. At the time, Wordle had just gotten very hot. And so people were like, it's the new Wordle, right? for marketers. That was really exciting to hear. So we started thinking like, man, how can we automate this? How can we make this a more regular thing? And I thought, you know what, before we do that, I would really like to make sure that we can get lightning to strike again with this quiz. Like let's get another set of 5 ads. Let's run it again and see if we get the same number of respondents. Oh, I also, again, like a good marketer, distributed this in all kinds of places. Newsletter, social, paid and organic, and our nurture campaign as well. So we did the second quiz and I got 200 respondents, despite people saying that they would take this quiz every day if they could, right? What people say and what they do are two very different things. And so even though I had great signal, I had people telling me they would take this quiz all the time if it were provided to them. What they did was the exact opposite. And so we realized, you know, we got a lot of great content out of this. We have kind of squeezed it for all it's worth. Let's update the blog with the new information that we were able to retrieve out of this second quiz. But let's not put any more time into, you know, trying to automate this, trying to make it a more regular thing, because we're just going to kind of spin our wheels and people are not going to engage like they did that first time. That first time was magical. It was new. It was exciting. It's probably not something we want to do on a super regular basis. So if you remember one thing from this whole presentation is to aim small and miss small, right? Do that MVC, create that minimum viable content, the lowest common denominator of the idea, just enough to get a bead on whether or not people like the idea. Take it one small step further, up the ante on the visual or the format or where you're distributing it. Take one more step, right? Just small incremental changes, adding 1 or 2 things each time to make it a little more interesting and blow it up just a little bit further, but making sure each time you're getting signal that this is an idea worth pursuing. That is it. I hope that you learned something new and interesting today. I hope that you will incorporate the idea of minimum viable content into your strategies. It has helped me. It has helped me grow as a marketer. It has helped me grow my team in their understanding of how content works, how testing works. How do we know what ideas to go after and which ones to leave behind? It's a really, really important part of the strategy, and I hope that you will make it part of yours. I would love to hop on live now and take any questions you have.
All right, that was fantastic, Jess. Thank you so very much for sharing all those incredible examples. I think I might have shared the VDI breakup letter with practically every marketer that I know. It was such a genius thing to put out. Absolutely.
It's so good.
It was really
So good.
All right. If there are some questions in the chat, we can take those now. I already see one from Nico. Who's talking about a recording? Okay, Nico, we've already answered that one for you. All right. I think there's, if folks can just drop their questions here now, I can pick them up for Jess. In the interim, I do have a question for you, Jess, and this is something that I've struggled with myself a little bit, right? When your MVCs fail continuously, what do? Where do you sort of go back and try and fix the cracks?
Yeah, such a good question, Pallavi. I think there's a few things that could be going wrong there. One is you might not have enough a critical mass of audience. Like the channel might not be giving you enough people to even get enough signal. So that's one. See if you are able to find a better channel. And that can even be like going back to Ryan's
presentation right before this, that can even be that you are just going around and you're getting this idea in front of, 15 customers and getting their ideas, right? It doesn't have to necessarily be a published post. The idea of an MVC is that you are just doing minimal work to get an idea in front of your audience and see what they think. And that can be in the form of like just hopping on a Zoom with, your customers and saying, I'm working on this thing. Here's why we think this might work. What do you think? This is also a process that I use. I'm working on a big research report right now, but before I sunk 6 figures into it, I wanted to make sure that like the idea was sound. So I sat down with a number of our advisors and customers and walked them through the entire thing to make sure that it made sense, right? So if you're getting that like just kind of crickets over and over, that can be a really great place to start. Another is to go back to those customer insights. Did you gather them in the first place? Are you using the right ones? Maybe what you heard from one customer is not kind of the universal consensus, and maybe you need to bring that insight up with other customers. So really going back to that customer research and making sure that it's coming from a very sound place, and that's where the ideas are coming from before you're testing them. I think those are the 2 places I would really like dig into first.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We do have a question in the chat from Mary. And Mary's asking, how are you using generative AI to support your approach to MVCs? Are you using it at all? Also, Jess?
That's a great question. I have not used AI at all for this purpose, simply because I think it comes from such deep customer insights, and it has to be such a simple version. And I don't think AI is good at that. AI is great at extrapolating and adding bulk to something that doesn't have enough. And I think what you're really trying to do is like boil it down. Maybe one thing could be like, hey, here's a transcript of a talk I had with a customer. Boil this down to like the 3 best takeaways. And from there, right? Like maybe from there, it's like, here's a great idea. Maybe we start thinking about some sort of idea in this vein. But that's a great point. I have not really used that for MVC. Now, when you start to extrapolate, when you're like, okay, there's something here. Okay, here, I'm going to do kind of the next level up. I'm going to scale this test up a 3rd time, right? And see what I get. Okay, now it can be all of these things, right? Now I might sit in front of, ChatGPT, or I might jump into Copy AI and build a workflow around like, here's a post that did really, really well. Like, what about this, do you think did so well? Or can you write me 3 more that kind of sound like this? Or, right. And then you can kind of take that and adjust as needed. But that could be a really, really interesting use as well. That's a great question, Marie. Thank you so much. I think one question I get about this a lot is, can you like mess up your brand by testing bad ideas, right? Like, and not to say bad ideas, testing an idea that maybe doesn't resonate. And I'm going to like reassure you right now, you are not Coca-Cola. None of us are Coca-Cola. None of us are going to go out there and put an idea out that is going to be seen by so many people that it's going to wreck your brand. Like it just can't happen, especially if you're testing in a kind of a small organic place like a newsletter or, social media or your sales team. And so I think that's actually one of the better reasons to test is that, you can put something out there and see that it doesn't resonate, and then you don't go big on it, because that can tarnish the brand, right? You put a bunch of campaign money behind an idea that's just not going to work. Like, that can really start to do a bit of damage, not only for your brand, but for your, trust in your team as a marketer, right? Like, how come we didn't realize this was just going to flop so badly, right? So that's a really important reason to test, and don't worry, you can't break your brand.
Thank you for that, Jess. I also, so this is something that you were talking about earlier on in the session, right? Where you said that as marketers, as content people, there's never a dearth of ideas that we can pick up and work with, right? How do you prioritize which of these? So let's say you've run a bunch of customer interviews, you've spoken to a few folks, you've come up with a few ideas. How do you prioritize which of these you want to run the MVC with?
Yeah. Okay. So there's a sweet spot between what your product was built to do, the problem customers have, and what is happening in the market right now that makes something feel timely and relevant. And I think that's why like the VDI thing worked really well, because we're kind of at a tipping point with VDI. It's a pretty old technology, but it was kind of the best solution people had for a long time until now. Now there's better things happening. And so it's kind of this point where these IT leaders can come out and say, okay, we're going to find a different way to do this thing because it's just not working for us anymore. And now we have options. Our product was built to solve that problem, and our customer is looking for a solution to this problem, right? And so there's a really nice sweet spot there. So I think that's why we prioritize that one as an idea, because it kind of it checked all three of those boxes. Sometimes an idea can check two, like your product might be built to solve a challenge, and your customer might have those challenges, but there's no real market force making it urgent. And so it's like, well, why would anyone act now on this? There's like, let's hold off on that until there's some reason for people to see this as a very urgent problem, right? So I think thinking about it in that way will help you prioritize. Like, we have all these ideas. Which one really kind of checks all three of those magic boxes that is going to allow us to have like a credible point of view, because our product was built to solve this problem. It's a problem our customers really want to solve right now. And there's something happening in the market that makes it like we have to solve it today, yesterday, right? So those are the things that I look at that rise up to the top of the list.
All right, that makes a lot of sense, Jess. Thank you so much for elaborating on that. And on that note, folks, we are going to have to call it a wrap on this one, because I know that quite a lot of us are possibly waiting to go grab some lunch or a snack, because we've been doing this for a while now. Jess, I wanted to just say thank you for being here with us today, and for an incredible session, and for the fantastic examples of MVCs that you shared with all of us today. It was incredibly insightful to sort of see how you take something very small and meaningful and build on that to continue to deliver value, along with continuing to test the strength of the idea, right? Okay, thank you so very much to everybody who's been a part of our sessions this far. We are going to be back in 30 minutes to get on with the rest of the two sessions for the day. The next one coming up is with Stefan Hedebrandt, and Stefan is going to be talking to us about content recycling. He's going to be showing us the actual process that he uses at Dream Data to recycle the content that they produce with their team. And following that, we'll have Madeline Work from Chili Piper, who's going to be talking to us about how she's made everybody in her company a content creator. So you definitely want to come back and hear both of these wonderful marketers talk about their experiences. We will find you back here in another 30 minutes. You don't need to close your tabs. You can just leave this session, this event session open. And as soon as the next session begins, you will be pulled right into it. All right, Jess, George, thank you so very much. And we will see you back here in 30 minutes. Thanks all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much.
Bye.